In a world torn asunder by a magical energy storm, Novus is in need of heroic legends to bring peace back to its people. Since the Maelstrom, the humans have developed supernatural skills. Across the land, the dead rise due to the residual storm magic. Goblinoids and terrifying monstrosities now roam the land. The Maelstrom's magic even created powerful dragons and demons. The major cities of the world have been searching for people with the ability to defeat these creatures before it is too late. Will you be one of these heroes?
Welcome folks, today the Hungry Gamer does another Kickstarter preview. This time it is of Legends of Novus, designed by Woodbury and published by Fundamental Games. And before I get going, a quick thank you to Canadian Kev for doing the voiceover intro today. And do take a moment and turn on the Klingon subtitles, because that is where I will make any corrections for any mistakes that I make as I work through the how to play. So Legends of Novus is a fantasy RPG adventure game, and it's really different from any other fantasy RPG style game I've played recently. And before I'm able to explain that to you, let me quickly set up the board for a two-player game, and we'll do a quick walkthrough of how the game works, and I think it'll become pretty clear how this game works. So, here we have the game board, which as you can see, it's just a map. And on the map, I have the two different characters that I'll be using. Now, before I go any further, let me just say that this is not only a prototype, but it is a print and play prototype, and there's a couple of pieces that weren't ready yet that I don't have, and I'll try to make a point to point that out as I go on and work through. The first thing is, rather than actually having the standees that will eventually come with this game, those weren't ready yet. So instead, I have you pull two minis from one of my favorite dungeon crawlers, Wander the Cult of Barnacle Bay by Panda Cult Games. And for the two characters I'm using, the first is Kane, the Knight of Exire, and for him, I am using Gunbjorn, the smashy polar bear from Wander. And then for Chandril, the Priestess of Braille, I am using Liz, again also from Wander the Cult of Barnacle Bay. So that's who those are, and I'm going to stick those back on the map where they begin. Now the object of this game is, when you're in competitive mode, to be the first person to reach 25 experience points. And there is also, it's worth saying, a solo mode, in which case the goal is to complete one quest adventure and to destroy 3 of the large quest monsters. And later on I will explain what those are, and that'll make more sense. There's also an option to play 2-on-2 in teams, and there is, in the pre-alpha works, a full co-op mode, but that is very, very far away, and that will be a release for even after the Kickstarter. But it is something that is in the works. So let's talk about the setup. So the way it works is each player picks a character, and I've already shown you the two that I've chosen. There are others. And with that comes a character class. And as you can see, Chandril is my priest. And you know that this is the priest class because it has this symbol over here. Down here, this means the initial combat bonus that you get. And then there's 2 special abilities over here. And then I have Kane, and he is the fighter. And that is what this symbol here means. He starts with a combat bonus of 3. And then, of course, he has his abilities also over here. In addition to that, each player starts with 10 gold. Now, I am using small cubes here to represent my gold, but in the actual game, there will be coins. And so what I've just done is I've decided that yellow cubes represent 5, and then every other cube represents 1. And if I need to get up to 10s, I will use some green cubes for that. So 10 gold for Kane, and I will just put those down next to his player board, and I will show you that in a minute. And over here we have 10 gold for Chandril as well. Now let's take a look at the rest of the setup. And over here we have my yellow deck here, which again, as a reminder, this is a print and play, so I just have sleeved all the cards. The yellow cards are the encounter cards. These are all monsters of some sort that you might have to fight. The green cards are reward cards, and these are armor and potions and weapons and things of that nature. And then we have the blue cards here, which are the adventure cards. And these vary. These might be treasure. These might be events that happen. These might be actions that you can use only at certain points. Or they might be skills. And finally, curses. And all of these are things that you can get, and I will explain them as they come up throughout the first turn or two playthrough that I do. The next thing that you have is each player, and I'm going to zoom out here, has a player board. And you'll see these are actually quite large player boards, and I'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the game. And you see each player gets one. Again, this is a print and play, so this would actually not be a little curled cardstock here, but you do get the idea. You have space down here for 3 skills. Over here you have space for 4 items, a head slot, a body, 2 hands, and feet. Then over here you have a space to track your combat power. As I said, my fighter here starts at +3. A place to track your experience. All characters start at 2 experience. Down here it tells you the amount of combat bonus you get depending on your experience level. So the more experience you have, the stronger you are at fighting. And then down at the very bottom, I have my hand. And usually you would keep these to yourself, but for this few turn playthrough, I've opened up so we can see. And when you start the game, each player gets 1 adventure card and 1 reward card. And these go into your hand, and I'll tell you when you get to play them. But we'll see Kane here has started with a Cloak of Concealment, which is a body slot. If I sell it somewhere, it's worth 15 gold. It gives me 1 combat power. And if I try to do an evasion, I get +3, which works out pretty well because Kane, as a fighter, if he tries to do an evasion, he loses 2. So I now would be back up to a net +1. And then I have my adventure card, which is an event. And if I draw this event, and you are the player with the most XP, draw another event to place this card on top of the event deck. This is at the beginning of the game, so I get to hold on to it. Gain up to 5 experience, but not more than the player with the highest XP. So if I were to play this, I would gain experience and match myself up with the player with the highest experience. Now, to be fair, I don't actually know if this is one that you can start the game with, so I'm just going to assume that no, I would actually discard this and shuffle it back in. So I'm just going to take it, discard it, and draw another one. And I have a small treasure, which is worth 5 gold. And again, that goes into my hand. And then Chandrel, she has a Potion of Invisibility, which is one-time use. It gives you bonuses. And she has a Back Alley Deal, which is an event. And you can give another player any card from your hand or character sheet, and then take a reward card from their character sheet. And both cards go to the player's hand. So basically, it's kind of a swap. And in a 2-player game, you might wind up just kind of passing this back and forth. But we will see how that goes. Then the other things that you need to play are just a few dice. You need a minimum of 2 d10s, and you need the adventure die. And again, this is just a die with the stickers put on top of it, but we will talk about this adventure die a little bit later on. Once you have gotten all of that, you are ready to start the game. Okay, so to start the game, everyone starts at the very center of the board in the place called Vase City. And the game is played in 3 phases, though the second phase you have a choice of 2 different things that you can do. And so I will show you what they are here. And the first one is you do your preparation phase. And in this, you're allowed to play any number of reward cards. You can play 1 adventure event card. You can purchase an adventure card or 1 reward card for 25 gold and place it into your hand. And so I'm going to start with Kane, and I'm allowed to play any number of reward cards. Well, I only have 1, so I'm going to play this Cloak of Concealment. And I will take that and I will put it onto my character board. And again, it just goes right there into the middle. And the next thing that I will do is I like to keep track of my combat power as I gain it, just to try to keep myself from having to add it up every single time we play. So I started with 3, and my card here, if you recall, gave me another +1. So I moved my combat power here up to 4. And so now Kane's combat power is 4, and again, that will make sense in just a little bit. I do not have enough money to purchase any other cards, so I have to skip that phase. Then I move into the adventure phase, and this is where you have a choice. You can either travel, which means clearly you move to someplace else on the continent, or you can explore the location that you're at. It's important to note that you can only explore a location if you did not explore it the previous turn. But for now, I'm going to say I'm going to travel. And to do that, I get to move up to 2 map markers. So I will have Kane here move from Vase City here over to this spot, and then I will have him move just up to here. So he's moved 2 spots. Then what happens is you roll the adventure die. And the adventure die has a couple of different things that you can get. There's this one here, which means you can move 1 more space if you like. There is this one here, which means you have an encounter, so you draw a yellow card and you fight it. There is this one, which means you found some treasure and you draw it. Or there is this one here, which means you draw an adventure card. And anytime you travel, you roll this die. And I've gotten the encounter. So that means that Kane has encountered some kind of monster on the way. So I will go to my yellow deck, which is the encounter deck, and I draw. And here I have come across a zombie horde. Now let's talk about how combat works, because clearly I'm entering combat. First, I have a choice. I can choose to fight, or I can choose to evade. If I evade, I simply roll my 10-sided die. If I get a 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, I have evaded. But remember that Kane, as a fighter, gets -2 on that roll, but he gets +3 for his Cloak of Concealment, so he would be at a +1. But how incredibly boring would it be if I ran away from the very first fight? So that's certainly not going to happen here. Now the things that are important to look at on this card. There's the type, undead, which doesn't mean anything to Kane, but if this was my priestess, she would get a bonus against this monster. If I beat it, it's worth 1 experience. It has 5 attack power. If it beats me, I will lose 3 experience. And also if I win, I will gain 5 gold and 1 reward card. Also, you'll note here that it's very easy to run away from the zombie horde. I would get actually another +3 if I chose to run. Then if you look down here, if you are defeated, you must attach this card to a skill slot as a curse. Each time you would gain XP, you gain 1 less. So it's really nasty if I lose to these monsters. But what kind of hero would I be if I did not try to fight it? So this is how it works. So I will put that there to help me remember that it has 5 attack power. And as a reminder, Kane has a +4. And then I have to also double check and look at my fighter abilities, which are I gain +1 if I have 2 weapons or a 2-handed weapon, +2 if I'm fighting a monstrosity creature. Sadly for me, neither of those apply. And then I have this at the bottom, Expert Maneuver. I can discard a card to gain +2 for 1 round of the battle. And if this is a quest creature, then I can repeat this as many times as I want. Now, I currently am down by 1, and I don't particularly like those odds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to discard this card here to give myself +2 more for this battle, which will put me up to 6, or 1 more than my opponent has. So for all intents and purposes, Kane is at a +1 for this fight. And I'm going to say that Kane is the red one and the monster is the blue one. So once you've determined who has what bonuses, you roll the dice. And Kane has a 2 +1 for 3, and the monster has a 10. So the monster beat down Kane horribly. And so that means I have to follow the negative effects of this card. And on this card, that is, I lose 3 experience. You cannot go down below 0. So I drop down to 0. I don't recall if I mentioned at the very beginning, but you start with 2 experience, so I am now down to 0. And then I have to take this card and I put it on myself as a curse on my character board. And so that goes just right down there. And that'll affect me later on in the game with my experience. And that would be the end of the travel die, but it's not the end of my travel phase. Now I've wound up in a location. Now for me, it is just a blank location on the middle of the map. And so I've done my travel, and that is now the end of my second phase. Then I move on to the recovery phase at the bottom. And then I can replay any number of reward cards. I can play 1 adventure event card. I can sell things if I'm in a city. I can exchange gold for XP as per the chart, and that is right here. You can turn in XP turn in gold for experience. Because remember, the way that you're trying to win is you are trying to get up to 25 experience. Now, experience is really a little bit of a misnomer in this game. Yes, experience does represent the combat experience that you get, but it also is representing, in many ways, your renown as you are spreading gold all around this world. Because if you remember, the game is called Legends of Novus. And the interesting thing here is you are actually trying to become a legend of this world. At the same time, you do want to keep the world from being destroyed by this maelstrom and this magic that's flying around. But really, your main goal is to become a legend. And so spending your money, throwing cash around is one way to do that. And so that kind of boosts your reputation. And then the next thing is, if you have at least 10 experience, you would change to an advanced class. And I'll go ahead and show you what those are right now. What that means is you can then pick a new class card. And you look at your character card, and you're looking for any advanced class that has that symbol. So I could, if I wanted, become a ballistic battle mage, and that changes my combat bonus and changes my skills here. Or I could become a brutal beast form, or I could become a perfect paladin, or so on and so forth. There's just various skills, and that really allows you kind of to tell your own story as you're leveling up. Now, I know some of you are probably wondering, well, what if you get beaten by something later on and you drop back below 10 experience? You do keep your card, you don't get rid of it suddenly. And it's also important to note that that does replace your previous class card. And so that is the end of my fighter, Kane's turn. Now, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and just pretend that Chandril has already moved somewhere else on the map to an actual location with a name. So right here we have the Ridges of Kadar, and we'll say that she's starting her turn there. So first she would go through the preparation phase just like any other turn, which is she starts out, she plays any number of reward cards, and so what she's going to do is she is going to play this potion of invisibility. And so that would go onto her character board, just right there, in one of her item slots. Then she would have the option to purchase an event card. However, she only has 10 gold at the moment, so she can't do that. And she could play one adventure card from her hand if it was an event. Now, as it turns out right here, she does have an event. And so what she can do is she can give another player this card and take something from them. So she's actually going to do that. She's going to give that to Kane, and that will go into his hand. And then she's going to take this Cloak of Concealment from him, which would weaken him and would give her something that she can play next turn. If you make a note to follow the order of operation here, you'll see that she's supposed to do that second. I did it third, but she's supposed to do that second after playing any number of reward cards. So she is starting her turn there, already in these ridges. And so what she's going to do is, instead of travel, she's going to explore. And you notate that by laying the character down, just so you don't forget, because as I mentioned at the beginning, you can only explore one time before you have to move away and then come back. And so you go to the location guide, and you look in there to see if there is a special event for that particular location. And so we come here to the Ridges of Kadar, and you see travel. If you face an encounter on a turn in which you travel to or past the Ridges of Kadar, you gain +2 on all combat rolls that turn. Now, as I said, we are assuming that I started my turn here, so that is not something that happened. But it is something that could have happened in the future. I could have passed through it, or I may wind up getting an event, a combat event, a little bit later on. And so there is not a special Explore event, so I just get to do a normal event. And that means you draw one reward card, and that goes to your hand. And I got the Scroll of Summoning. It's a one-use item. You may use this at the beginning of your recovery phase, and you gain a basic animal ally. And then you draw one adventure card. And I got Travel Plans. This is an event. You may only play this event during your recovery phase. Move your player up to 3 map locations away from your current location, but do not trigger location events. Now, the other option that I could have done is I could have chosen, instead of drawing a reward card, I could have chosen to face another encounter or play an adventure card from my hand that was listed as an encounter. I chose not to do that to show you kind of the other things that you can do and the other things that happen. Now, that is almost everything that is to how the nuts and bolts of this game work. The only other thing are, if you look at the map here, you'll see that there are various, I'm zooming in, you'll see that there are various red named locations. And these are where you can fight quest monsters. And the various quest monsters each have their own special location. You have to actually go there to be able to fight them. If you defeat them, they are gone from the game, you get the bonus, and then the location has a different effect that you can take every time you explore there. So here we have two of them. There's Kismatic's Keep and the Crystal Caverns. And so if we take a look at these here, if I go to Kismatic's Keep, I can fight Kismatic the Lich Lord. And he is worth 3 experience. If you beat him, you gain 1 magical piece of treasure, you gain an adventure card, you gain 15 gold. If he defeats you, you lose 3 experience. Note, it's going to take you 17 to actually beat him, so you have to gear yourself up to do that. Before you start the fight, you roll the d10, and then you add your XP. If the result is less than 25, you lose any magical reward bonuses that you have. And if you happen to have any undead allies, they do not add their bonuses in this battle. Now, this is one of the big monsters, and on the back, you can see it has his history. The other option that I had there was in the Crystal Caverns. And that means if I were to go there, I could also fight the Krager Beast, who's a little bit easier to fight and just doesn't have quite as good rewards. And that's how the game works. You kind of move through, travel all the way around the continent very quickly, if you think of it in terms of miles traveled, because after all, this is a continent, until someone gets to 25 experience, and they're the one that is the winner. Now, so what do I think of this game? I think this is a fascinating game because it is unlike any other game that I've ever played before. Usually when I play a fantasy game where you have a character board and you're leveling up and you're gaining items and equipping items, it is a dungeon crawl. However, this, as you can see, clearly is not. All the combat is done via dice and via cards, and there is no tactical combat whatsoever. Additionally, what is interesting about this game and why it feels different, again, is it is in many ways a very epic story that you are telling. You're going from an unknown hero with almost nothing to his or her name until by the end you are fighting things like dragons, or this Krager Beast, or the Lich, or this gigantic serpent, this nasty bug monster, and so on and so forth. And doing everything you can to save the world from being ravaged. And again, doing it in a way to where you can become the greatest hero of the age. However, this is not a campaign. You do this in just one sitting. This game will take anywhere from 45 to 90 minutes if you have a lot of players. If you play solo, you can actually knock out a game in about 30 minutes. And so that to me is very different. That's very interesting that you have this epic story of going from a zero to a legend very, very quickly. Not to mention you are traversing this entire continent back and forth, which is very cool. It's very unique to me. And I like that. I think that's very interesting, and I think a game like that is probably different than something many people have played. I also like the art. I think the art is good. I think it's interesting. I think it is really strong, solid fantasy art. I also like that this game, unlike any other fantasy game I've played, is not about the end result. And what I mean by that is this game feels like it's about the journey. It's about going from Vase City all the way over to here to find items and power yourself up, and then heading all the way back to this demonic temple all the way up here to kill this quest creature, and then getting all the way back down to here to kill another one, and you're traveling back and forth across this continent constantly. And because combat is so simple, if you recall, I said it's just done by a quick roll of the dice, now suddenly the combat's over, it really makes it feel like it's this journey that's the most important thing. And I do need to note very quickly that when you are fighting these quest monsters, it's actually a best 2 out of 3 battle. There are various abilities that might change that, but you actually do it 2 out of 3 times. So you actually have to go back in and keep fighting and battling this monster as you try to kill it. That also reminds me, I did forget to mention that this game has what is called its tragic fail. That means it doesn't matter what my bonus is. If when I roll a 1 in combat, I have failed and I lose. So just something to keep in mind. I know Wes is thinking about various ways to mitigate that, because certainly there are some players that will be a turnoff. That means there's a 10% chance that you just lose no matter how incredible you are. That doesn't bother me. I think that kind of lends to some good storytelling and really kind of makes it to where there are no guaranteed fights. I enjoy it, but I can certainly understand if someone is a little turned off by that. I also say that I feel like the journey is the most important part because of this travel die. This really changes the game up, because as you're traveling, suddenly you just find treasure. Suddenly you find more encounters, which seems like, well, that's a bad thing, but really that's the only way you're going to win, because you have to kill things to gain experience for the most part. And sometimes you find the space where it's, I guess it's really good weather, and you get to travel a little farther as you're trying to get where it is you're trying to go. And I really think that the inclusion of this die here really makes it unique. Another thing that I really like about this game is that Wes has gone in and put an absolute ton of lore into this game. And you get some of it in the rulebook, and you get some of it here as you look at these different quest monsters. But there is a history behind each of the characters, and that's going to be made available through the free app that he's going to provide that goes with the game, that will give the history of all the characters, the history of all the locations, the story behind the game, so on and so forth. Now let's move over to the things that I'm not as big of a fan of. And I'm not going to say that are negatives, because I don't necessarily dislike them. They're just things that kind of popped out to me, and I think are things that might pop out to some of you as well. The first one is these character boards. Now, even though, as I said, that the ones I'm using here are print and play versions, they are prototypes, the size of these is accurate. When I spoke with Wes, he told me that he really does not personally like mini cards. He thinks that means that there's no point in having art on the top of them for the ones that do have the art, and he just doesn't like them. So that means that these full poker-sized cards is going to be what you use to play the game. And that means that, yes, each character will take up a significant amount of space. As I mentioned earlier, some people may be turned off by the tragic fail. You roll a 1 on the die, you automatically lose. This game also will be coming with standees, not minis. Now, personally, I like standees because I'm not the kind of person who ever paints anything, and I would much prefer to have somebody just give me the standee with all of the art on there. It's good to go. However, some people may not feel the same way about that. And then the last thing that stands out to me, and I think that is really worth talking about, is you really need to make sure you understand what this game is. It is not a dungeon crawl. It is not like any other game that I've played before. It is this, in many ways, to me, new style of game. So I think it's really important that you understand what it is that you are getting into. You are not getting into an epic campaign. You are not getting into something where you are going to use the same character over and over again. You are not even getting into a game where you are working together for the most part. And that is different than most fantasy RPG style games. So it's important to understand that, nope, you're about to play a game that's about becoming the best and doing it and focusing on the journey. All the exciting stuff happens when you travel, when you roll that die. Yes, you get to locations and you do an explore there, but you can't even stay there if you want to. You have to keep moving on. If it sounds like the kind of game that you're interested in, then this is definitely the game for you. I think it's fun. I think it's fascinating to play. As always, if there was anything that you think I could have done better in this preview, or if I made any gameplay mistakes, please do let me know in the comments. If it is a gameplay mistake, please include the timestamp so it'll be easy for me to find and put in that Klingon subtitle. And finally, if you did enjoy this preview, do like it, do hit subscribe, and that'll be your best way to see the new previews and reviews we have coming. We have a couple of unboxings coming up in the next few weeks, and I am getting closer to announcing our first giveaway for subscribers. So if you're interested in winning some free things, go ahead and subscribe as well. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.